Well, hello, that's me again. Today is the February 22nd, and as you might expect, I need to comment on Vladimir Putin's address to the Federal Assembly and 200,000 people gathering and meeting in Moscow today. And I would talk about it, but let's start with this. What you see here is the famous Russian meme now, and this is after the famous Aesop fable tale, which later was multiplied through Western culture. In Russia, it was primarily through Ivan Andreevich Krylov, famous fable writer. And this is about the crow, raven, and the fox. And the raven once got the piece of cheese, and sitting on the branch of the tree was about to eat it when the fox was running below and noticed that, and understanding that there is no way it's gonna get to a raven, it started to basically flatter it straight without any inhibitions, and as the result, Raven was absolutely flattered, and then, of course, Fox tells Raven that, yeah, how about your wonderful, feathers and things like that? I'm sure you have a wonderful voice. And Raven just started to do what? Opened its beak to produce the voice, and the cheese dropped, and Fox took it and was gone in a second. In reality, however, in this wonderful caricature, as you can see yourself, Fox is on the tree. And what Fox says in Russian here is, I will translate it to you. You have to understand, addressing to Raven, the question is not even about if you will give me cheese or not. And that explains that something is much more larger in terms of overall, so to speak, events is implied. And this is exactly how one would describe the situation with Vladimir Putin's yesterday address to the Federal Assembly, and of course hysteria in the foreign media, not Russian media, especially American one, because it is definitely the issue and the case actually for the some good level psychiatrists to figure it out. I mean, and I've been at it for years, and as I already stated, before we proceed any further, you have to understand what average American journalist is, including Western too. If we talk about Western Europe, it is usually a very uncultured person who gets into some kind of communications or whatever, English language or something degree, gets this Bachelor of Arts in Communications or Journalism, and then imagine the guy who just nothing wrong with this. I mean, I love, for example, American West. I adore it. It's the most beautiful place on earth. But say guy somewhere from Ohio or Iowa gets into accidentally to Ivy League, if to imagine, gets this degree, and then they go in as being foreign correspondent somewhere, and they go to Moscow, which is 900 years old and still considered a young Russian city, or go to Beijing and China, which has the almost 5,000 years history, or they go to Europe. They look at Rome, they look at Moscow, they look at China, they look at Japan, those ancient cultures, and guess what do they experience? Right, most of them, they experience complex of inferiority. And as a result, majority, not all, but majority of them, many of them don't even get the language, proper language, and study language of the locality, but of course they never accept the fact that they represent the culture which is very young, and which cannot really show around for the cultures which survived for thousands of years. And they begin to feel, obviously, this complex of inferiority. And complex of inferiority is a straight path. It's Psychology 101 to hatred. They refuse to accept things on their own merit. They want to measure it only in terms of some great American values. There are some, absolutely, I live in the United States, I'm a US citizen. There are some things which I adore in American life, and be the constitutionalism, at least, which doesn't work anymore, but it used to. So, and when you begin to look at this is obviously, their reaction is absolutely hysterical, especially considering the fact that after Vladimir Putin correctly stated, and you can read it in his speech, and it was broadcast directly on many channels, that basically, yeah, we're looking at people who are perverting the world, perverting the Western civilization. Many of them are sexual deviants, many of them pedophiles, many of them, and as I already stated, culture and being cultured is not just the matter of reading Chaucer or, you know, discussing the types of very exquisite scotch or cigars. No, this is not a culture. This is some very shallow refinement. The culture is primarily moral and ethical entity. And guess what? This is exactly what people in the Beltway lack. And I'm not talking about Europe. There's nothing to talk about Europe. So yeah, and that is why Vladimir Putin is absolutely correct, that we are talking about the institutionalizing of pedophilia. We have, well, now Anglican Church is now talking about the God, which of course is gender neutral. So, you know, there's no necessity to go there. And as the result, they all get hysterical, apart from the fact that, of course, the mythology of the free media in the West is a complete bullshit. Most of American media, unless, of course, we're talking about some alternative media, they're nothing more than propaganda outlets. And I can tell you, they can give the run to Goebbels propaganda or the propaganda department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union a run for their money, believe me. And so what we have in this case, after the speech of Vladimir Putin, they understood that the fox kind of is on the branch sitting next to the raven and talking to it that, you know what, the question is not even about the cheese anymore. It's much larger than that. And here it is. We will start with this thing which have been produced by Kremlin yesterday. This is the order of the President of Russian Federation on the 21st of February 2023, that which states acceptance of the presidential order on the May 7th, 2012, number 605, or about the measures of the realization of the foreign policy of Russian Federation. It's now null and void. Doesn't apply anymore. The whole concept of Russian foreign policy changed completely. And as you can see yourself, it was absolutely stated that those principles, which were very much pro-Western at that time, which were very much pro-European, G7, all this European Union type thing, gone, null and void. Russia doesn't see herself as the part of Europe, and in fact, the new foreign policy is absolutely, and well, anti-European, and it's the only way to call it, and anti-Western, because obviously as the moral and ethical cultural foundation to it have been described by the President of Russian Federation yesterday. So there's nothing to talk about with the West. It's simple as that. And indeed, how can you talk to people who use the gender-neutral God, who want to reinstall pedophilia? Evidently, the Spanish parliament now debating the fact that you have to institutionalize and legitimize the bestiality. So you have the right to screw the goats or horses, what have you, in Spain. I don't know if they will accept it, how it will pass, but I mean, the fact that they discuss it, it already tells you everything you need to know about modern West. And it is the absolutely this raven which doesn't understand that fox sits to it next to it and tells it, you know what, it's not just about cheese anymore. You are just done. You know, it's over. Be thankful that I'm not going to eat you. And that's what brings us to this most important thing. First, we'll start with obviously the hysteria which went in the Western media, and you know, we can obviously start with the fact that you remember many of them, and I made the whole video about it, that Vladimir Putin fell downstairs, soiled himself. He also has what? Cancer, he has leukemia, he has Alzheimer's, he's in the early stages of dementia, and in general, he was supposed to die somewhere around the end of the 2022. Remember this? It wasn't just this low low-life sewer of the British tabloids. Many in the United States actually were repeating this garbage trash, which of course they've been fed from Kiev, and you know what? But I looked at Vladimir Putin yesterday. Damn, he looks good. I mean, he is jumpy, very energetic, and yeah, especially comparing to Mr. Biden, who again today fell on the ladder of the Air Force One when flying out of Warsaw. So it's kind of, you know what? We know that generally, as I already stated, Western journalism is basically prostitutes, literally. I mean, not necessarily in figure of speech, but literally. They will sleep with anybody and they will sell their families for anything, for a piece of their 15 minutes under the spotlight and whatever the story they can produce. It's mostly trash, human trash, which works there, be that Wall Street Journal, be that New York Times, be that, let alone all those tabloids, although again, let's face it, they are tabloids. And just to demonstrate it to you, here it is. The reaction was this. This is CNN. Look at this. CNN, look at this. US believes Russia had failed intercontinental ballistic missile test around when Biden was in Ukraine. And as you might expect, they completely pulled it out their asses, because obviously CNN, you have basically semi-literate people who work there and who are just low-lives, most of them are. They invent shit. They pull things out of their ass, and they do not understand what is a ballistic missile test for the ballistic missile, which has been now in the serial production and being deployed into their first regiments of the missile troops of the strategic designation, RVSN, as they call in Russia. You cannot explain this to these morons from CNN. They are imbeciles. Whoever this Oren Lieberman or Natasha Bernard, yeah, they are ignorant people. They are not educated. And here it is, for example, guess where they get this? As you can see yourself, according to 2 US officials familiar with the matter. Well, let me put it this way. There are no those two officials familiar with the matter in Washington, D.C., because it's completely made up shit, basically, pardon my French. And this is about the things which are extremely serious, and it's very difficult to explain to people what the test of the ballistic missile is, and the only reason they produce this garbage is because they still butthurt on the fact that the United States had to inform Russia that Mr. Biden flies to Kiev and that Russia, please don't do anything. Well, Russians don't kill leaders of the states, especially such states as the United States. But, you know what, this is the thing. Then, of course, we have the other thing, which is absolutely crazy. I mean, this is Newsweek, and of the Nyakon rags, you know, they're basically, I mean, I don't know, it's just... So now they say Ukraine talk of taking back Crimea leaves US divided, and they talk about this division in the American public opinion, and you know, the fact that some people in the Beltway, within the Beltway, understand that taking Crimea back is absolutely impossible. It can start the war again. Going back to this caricature, wonderful meme, so to speak, of the raven and the fox, that fox tells it, it's not even about that, my friend, anymore. It's not about cheese. It's about the fact that you're done, and you will be done, and immediately all those reactions, of course, are confirmed by this. And guess what? How can I even explain it? If we go just back to, again, the fact that Mr. Putin, judging by the way it looks in Newsweek, looks really nice, you know, very focused and, you know, concentrated and alive and kicking, you know. So we have this. And first signs of this were about a week ago, when, well, even less than a week ago, more like 4 days ago, when China talks peace with Europe and Russia's Biden in Munich. Mr. Wang Yi, who is not anymore the foreign secretary or minister of the foreign affairs, he's higher than that. He is the member of the Politburo of the Communist Party of China. And he is the guy who actually oversees the whole of the foreign policy from the higher up, so to speak. And he basically stated that, yeah, you know what, the West is done. Basically, that's the message. But of course, because he does this in Munich, and he's talking about inseparable security and safety for the whole world, they didn't understand then. Well, maybe they did actually. They think that it was about, as Wall Street Journal now begins to lie, it was about merely Ukraine, and that China supposedly pushes something in terms of the peace plan on Ukraine. Wall Street Journal, as usually, lies. Mr. Wang Yi is now, well, yeah, yesterday, he was in Moscow. Funny coincidence, isn't it? And here we have the situation that Putin outlines importance of Russia-China ties for international order, and they say that they are very much in favor of and that this peace plan which Mr. Wang Yi brought to Moscow in one meeting with Mr. Putin, well, actually today, I believe even. So that Russia is really in favor of many points of this plan. But again, Wall Street Journal wants to reduce everything to Ukraine, where the United States and NATO are sustaining a catastrophic defeat. But it's not just about Ukraine. First, people need to understand, China cannot push anything on Ukraine because, as I already stated many times, in a military geopolitical, so to speak, pivot and axis of Moscow-Beijing, Beijing actually is a junior partner to Moscow here. Why? It's a separate issue. I will have to make a video on that. But the point is, it's Wang Yi brought not the plan about Ukraine. He brought the new vision of the new world, which was already exposed a little bit in Munich a few days ago, and it created a panic actually. Now, after Mr. Putin's speech, which was strangely coinciding with the visit of Mr. Wang Yi to Moscow, we have this situation that basically Russia completely changed already its foreign policy concept, which is profoundly anti-Western for absolutely justifiable moral, economic, and other issues, because West is in the war with Russia and its whatever you call it, the hybrid or what have you. And of course, this little teeny-weeny detail of Russia exiting or pausing, so to speak. It's suspending its participation in the START treaty. That is why CNN came up with this bullshit idea about that supposedly Russia was supposed to test Sarmat. I mean, you cannot explain this to people. They are idiots. So why it is so important? And it was immediately reaction, and Russia already from the United States, and Russia already responded with the statement that, well, we don't believe Americans. The main idea behind suspending of this START treaty is the fact that Mr. Putin specifically stated during his speech, while Russia doesn't completely eliminate the issue of the START treaty, but suspension is primarily following the path of not allowing American or NATO inspectors around Russia weapon making facilities whatsoever. Why it is so? And as you can remember, if you read it attentively, Mr. Putin already stated then that basically we know that American nuclear weapons, they are entering their decline situation, expiration time. And yes, there's a huge technological issue in supporting, providing support and maintaining the nuclear weapons. And yes, you have to test them periodically because obviously they decay, as anything in this world decays. But Russians are not stupid. They know that United States didn't test much of its weapons, and there are issues with maintaining them in appropriate order. And that is why Russia is ready to follow United States suit, because everybody understands now that United States will have at some point of time test its nuclear charges. The moment it happens, as Mr. Putin stated, Russia will follow suit and will detonate its own nuclear weapons. That is why we know that the testing range of Novaya Zemlya, New Land, famous Arctic testing range of Russia has been updated for the last couple of years. I mean, dramatically, actually. It's a new testing range right now with the latest, high-tech gizmos, which is designed to, the moment United States detonates its own charge, Russia will follow suit. But Russia will not allow anymore any kind of the American inspector nowhere near Russian weapon-making facilities. You may say, why? And why Russians knew that that's gonna hurt like hell? For a simple reason. I'm on record, and you can quote me on that. United States lost the arms race, especially nuclear arms race to Russia, and they lost it in about 10 years ago. The moment Sarmat RS-28 intercontinental ballistic missile went into the serial production and now is being deployed into the first line units of the strategic missile forces, and then with the development of the Avangard, which is already on a combat duty since 2019, and with the development of such things as A235 Noodle and all those funny looking S-500s which are being deployed now around Moscow for starters. You can understand what we are talking about. Yes, this is the horrifying truth for people in Pentagon, and they understand that, at least some of them understand that we are looking at complete diminishing of the credibility of the American nuclear deterrent. And this is the thing which they were afraid most of all. And fact is, if you look at Russians' ballistic missiles, good God, look at how many of them, new types, Russia produced since 2005, when their Bulava went into the serial production and began to be deployed at the Barei class Project 955 and Barei A class modernized 955M or A rather on those nuclear powered strategic missile submarines, and then you have the Sarmat and you have other things, and United States is nowhere near. It has Minuteman and it has Trident. Those are old missiles. They are from 70s. Nothing new have been created, and of course they play with all those nuclear charges, but you know what? What do I know? And obviously, people, as we already, I explained it many times, the only thing which the people within the Beltway, even those people who are supposedly called realists, the only thing they can do PR, they can do, let's say, psyops, they can do this media onslaughts, they can do manipulation of the public opinion. They cannot do anything practical. They cannot develop modern weapons. They do not know what modern combined arms warfare is. They don't know how to produce practically anything anymore. And when you put this together, you see yourself why Putin's speech, which essentially was, we don't need you, that's what it is, and we are against you, as the second point. That is why it created hysteria, especially against the background of Mr. Biden. Just oh God, it's absolutely physical. I have physical difficulty listening to his speeches, because it's the senior citizen abuse and absolutely empty rhetoric with zero substance on anything. And Mr. Putin already stated in his address that, yeah, you cannot beat us on the battlefield. I know this. I've been writing about this for years. I'm writing the fourth book about it, because why NATO cannot fight conventional combined arms warfare war against Russia and win or anything. It will be defeated with the catastrophic results. And if we look attentively now with the situation with China and Mr. Wang Yi being in Moscow, we can obviously get to the issue of Russian and China trade, which today comes out as news, and it tells that, oh my God, we begin to surpass the the expected rate of growth, and we might hit 200 billion target practically this year, and it will go on and will expand. And if you consider the fact that China right now, its total foreign trade is about 4 trillions. Both export and import, don't quote me on that, you can look it up. You'll say, oh, it's not that significant. Actually, it is very significant, despite the fact that it's being around 5% of this trade. It's the fact that what is being traded and what goes into China and outside of China towards Russia. And that is why this expansion is so significant. But that requires separate treatment, and we'll talk about it. But there was another thing, actually two things in Putin's speech which he specifically pointed out. One of them was about the fact that United States and West continue to rewrite history of the World War II. And read my lips, modern West as it exists today and its initial restoration after the World War II, and obviously the basically United States reaching those, well, let's say realistic economic, so to speak, miracle after the World War II, was primarily, and it was basically crucible of all that, was on the battlefields of the World War II. And I already showed it to you before. Here's how they thought about it in 2004. Nowadays, pretty much everybody talks in the Western Europe and in the United States that it was the Western Allies who defeated, well, not just Nazi Germany, the Axis forces, and Soviet Union was there. Yeah, just a little bit sidekicks. Obviously, Putin spoke about it because he understands. It's like pulling the rug or pulling the carpet under the feet of the United States and Western mythology about why West so great. Well, it was so great because Soviet Union actually defeated Germans. And not only Germans, the whole other bunch of armies and divisions from combined Europe. And of course, if anybody doubts about it, that what I'm talking about, we can always remember what Mr. Glantz and Jonathan House wrote in their fundamental and most authoritative work of the When Titans Clashed, how the Red Army defeated Hitler. And here it is. If the Western Allies had not provided equipment and invaded northwestern Europe, Stalin and his commanders might have taken 12 to 18 months longer to finish off the Wehrmacht. The result would probably have been the same, except that Soviet soldiers would have waited at France's Atlantic beaches rather than meeting the Allies at the Elbe. These are serious military historians which tell you the real history of the World War II. But of course, that's why they rewrite it. That is why you have the whole institutes. You have people with the American generals who want to rewrite. That is why they are basically the clownish George Patton is revered as some kind of the tactical genius in the United States. One has to ask the question, why? I mean, it just, there's no objective thing which actually points out that he was a genius. But hey, he had a Hollywood movie about him. That's pretty much it. So, and when you look at this is becoming absolutely crucial in terms of the now existential conflict between United States and Russia and the rest of the world, of which support of which Mr. Wang Yi brought to Moscow today, well, yesterday and today when speaking to Putin. 80% of this global south or the rest of the world supports Russia. That's the truth of it. And here is the other thing, and that is why they're desperate. If you go to responsible statecraft, by the way, organization supported by Mr. Koch and Mr. Soros, funny. But look at this, even those realists, look how they are hurting. Mr. Andrew Cockburn writes, we were promised economic shock and awe against Russia. What we got 1 year after its brutal invasion of Ukraine, Moscow looks poised to weather the worst of Western sanction. No shit, pardon my French. I am on the record. I'm constantly on the record that American humanities education, including through all those Ivy Leagues, all those courses in the history, in sociology, in all those things, they are bunk. As Mr. Hudson, Michael Hudson already stated, what they teach in the economics classes are not real economics there. It has nothing to do with the real economics, not how real economies work, not how geopolitics is formed, how the geopolitical balance is formed. They just don't know it. They don't understand. And you have all those PhDs writing basically, and well, all those theses and books, and they still cannot find their own ass with two hands in a brightly lit room. This is a catastrophe. It's intellectual. It's epistemic catastrophe. You take any PhD in economics or in whatever, geopolitics, all those courses which they study in all those, Georgetown or whatever in the international relations, they have no freaking clue. They are morons, literally. They don't understand how the world operates. And now when this situation with the fox sitting next to the raven and telling that, the gig is up, they still cannot accept it. But what they can do, obviously create alternative reality. That's the only thing. They always BS everybody, and in the end they BS themselves into utter submission. And in the conclusion of speaking about Mr. Putin's speech, here is the other thing which I applauded immediately. Look what he stated. And this is a direct translation. When speaking about education and the catastrophe which Western education is, Bologna process, he said, the first is the task to return to the traditional for our country basic training of specialists with higher education. The term of study can be from 4 to 6 years. I will explain. For example, if you go for 5 years in military academies in Russia, it means what? 6 days a week. You study on Saturday, full-blown day, and it comes down to 6 academic years. 4 years I usually should be reserved for the humanities degrees, because they do not require that intensive study as it requires in the military and military engineering and other fundamentals and industrial engineering fields. And look at this. He explains there how it should work, and that's where it's coming back now. At the same time, even within the same specialty, and one university programs can be offered that differ in terms of training depending on the specific profession, industry, and labor market demand. You can read the whole thing here, but I want to specifically point out nobody needs the engineer who has a bachelor in something when they didn't even study, and I met some of those. They didn't even study profoundly the calculus 3 integration and other serious calculus, or they didn't study differential equations, they didn't study advanced physics, and let alone those specific field-specific things, as I already stated. My title in my degree, as is for all my classes or guys who graduated with me for many years, is Specialist in Gyro Inertial Navigation and Complexes of the Naval Strategic Missile Systems. So that's the specialty. The rest of it, there was no credit thing. There are programs. There is the program which has so many hours which you need to dedicate to the specific field of study. And if you don't complete program, go screw yourself. Try again, or you're going to be thrown out of the academic facility. And that goes across the board. And this is a fundamental strategic shift which finally did happen in Russia, and I applaud this because it will have the strategic ramifications, I mean immense strategic ramifications. And to demonstrate this to you, here it is. You see this? This is the new way rich parents are paying to get their kids into the Ivy League. Guess how they do it? And this is like 2 days ago. Oh, they finally begin to tell you that actually their kids, in this particular case in New York, they attend the so-called Russian math class and Russian math schools, which prepare kids on the level of which is unheard of in the United States public schools. And just to demonstrate it to you, I demonstrated to you this before, but it kind of goes towards what we described today about Mr. Putin and what he's talking about in terms of the final return of Russian education, not only higher education, but public school. And just to show you, this is from Russian public schools textbooks, and I'll show you. This is the 9th grade. This is one of the departments of the trigonometry. As you can see yourself, this is what the ninth grade kids should do. Just basic trigonometric identities, which require a lot of knowledge of not just trigonometry, of course, but factoring. If we go to the fractions and factoring all the fractions, this is the 8th grade, as you can see yourself, and it is all about serious factoring, serious work with the polynomials and polynomial fractions and things of this nature. Then, of course, if you go to the 10th grade of famous Kolmogorov textbook, and this is the 10th grade. It's all about the trigonometric and exponential equations and things of this nature. So the academic level, which is not provided in the most American public schools, unless you go, like this stated in this article, you go to Russian math schools. And believe me, instead of Washington, I know a couple of Russian math schools. And guess what? Parents from former Soviet Union, now increasingly American parents, they throw those kids there, because obviously modern American public schools doesn't satisfy even the lowest of the lowest requirements for any kind of serious preparation in terms of engineering and in terms of going into the serious engineering or fundamental science programs in the American universities. And that's what Putin also spoke about yesterday. And when you begin to look at this, you begin to it begin to dawn on you the strategic importance of this speech, apart from the fact that, as I already stated, there are some people now who are increasingly butthurt from the fact that Russia is doing okay economically. In fact, actually it's growing now. And this is what I wanted to tell you today about. And this is, again, this is not enough to do it within the 30-35 minute segment. But we'll be talking about this. And this is what I intended to tell you today. This is what I told you today. And as always, guys, my profound thanks to my sponsors and supporters. And those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And as always, support me on Patreon or buy me cup or two of Jack Daniels. So, and that will be it for today. I'll talk to you later, guys, and have the nice rest of the week.